There's something about objections that tends to make people uneasy. Whether you're presenting an idea, pitching a product, or even trying to convince someone of your perspective, hearing phrases like, I don't think so, or that won't work for me can feel like running into a solid wall. But here's the shift in mindset that changes everything. Objections aren't roadblocks. They're opportunities, hidden doorways to understanding, connection, and progress. Think about it this way. When someone raises an objection, they're not rejecting you outright. In fact, quite the opposite. They're engaged. They're processing what you've said and comparing it to their own needs, doubts, or priorities. If they weren't interested, they'd simply disengage. Silence would be the ultimate rejection. So when someone voices an objection, they're giving you valuable insight into their thought process. That's your opening to turn the conversation around. The key to transforming objections into opportunities lies in how you respond. The first step, listen deeply. It's easy to get defensive or try to bulldoze through resistance with more persuasion, but that rarely works. Instead, slow down. Ask thoughtful questions. Say something like, can you help me understand your concern? Or what specifically is holding you back? By doing this, you're showing genuine respect for their perspective. You're also gathering critical information that will help you address their real concerns, not just surface-level hesitations. Once you truly understand their objection, the next step is reframing it. Every objection has two sides. For example, if someone says it's too expensive, they're not necessarily objecting to the price itself. What they're really saying is, I need to know if this is worth my investment. This is your chance to highlight value. Show them exactly how your solution solves their problem, saves them time, or improves their situation. Paint a clear picture of the benefits, and suddenly the cost becomes secondary. Another powerful tool in your arsenal is storytelling. People connect with stories far more than abstract facts or figures. If someone expresses doubt by saying, I'm not sure this will work for me, share an example of someone else who had similar reservations but went on to achieve success. Make the story relatable and vivid. Stories create emotional resonance, and emotions drive decisions. That's how you move someone from hesitation to action. One final piece of advice that can make all the difference: stay positive. Objections are not personal attacks. They're practical concerns. They reflect the other person's circumstances, priorities, or uncertainties, not a judgment of you. So keep your energy upbeat, your tone friendly, and your focus on finding solutions. A positive attitude is contagious. When you approach objections with confidence and optimism, you set the stage for breakthroughs. Every great accomplishment begins with overcoming resistance. Athletes, entrepreneurs, artists, they all faced obstacles and doubts along the way, but they didn't let those challenges stop them. They saw them as chances to adapt, grow, and improve. And you can do the same. Every objection is an opportunity to learn, to connect, and to demonstrate why what you're offering truly matters. With patience, empathy, and creativity, there's no limit to what you can achieve. Now let's talk about one of the most common objections you'll encounter. I need to think about it. On the surface, this might seem like a polite way of saying no, but dig a little deeper and you'll realize it often means something else entirely. What they're really saying is, I don't have enough information to make a decision right now, or I'm not convinced this is urgent. And that's where you come in, not to pressure them, but to gently guide them toward clarity. When someone says they need time to think, your first instinct might be to back off completely. After all, nobody likes to feel rushed, right? But here's the catch. Leaving them alone without addressing their concerns can sometimes mean losing the opportunity altogether. Instead, use this moment to ask thoughtful questions. For instance, you could say, absolutely, taking time to consider is important. Is there anything specific you'd like more clarity on before making a decision? This approach accomplishes two things. It shows respect for their process, while also uncovering hidden hesitations. If they mention a particular concern, say uncertainty about whether the solution fits their needs, you can then address that direct, provide examples, share testimonials, or break down how your offering aligns with their goals. The key is to make it easy for them to move forward by removing obstacles rather than adding pressure. Remember, people want to feel confident in their decision. Your job is to give them the tools to feel that confidence sooner rather than later. Another powerful strategy when faced with this objection is to create a sense of urgency, not through manipulation, but through relevance. Help them see why acting now might benefit them more than waiting. For example, if you're discussing a service or product that solves an immediate problem, highlight the consequences of delay. You might say something like, I understand wanting to take your time, but I'd hate for you to miss out on specific benefit, because timing was a fact. Frame it as a win-win. They get what they need, and you help them avoid unnecessary stress or missed opportunities. Let's shift gears for a moment and talk about another frequent objection. I've tried something similar before and it didn't work. This one can feel tricky because it seems like they're shutting down based on past experiences. But again, this isn't a dead end, it's an invitation to differentiate yourself. When someone brings up a previous failure, they're giving you a chance to show how your approach is different, better, or tailored specifically to their situation. Start by acknowledging their experience. Never dismiss it or act like it doesn't matter. Instead, validate their feelings by saying something like, that must have been frustrating. I'd feel the same way if I were in your shoes. Empathy goes a long way in building trust. Once you've acknowledged their perspective, pivot to explaining what sets your solution apart. Maybe it's a unique feature, a proven track record, or a personalized approach that addresses the exact issues they faced before. Whatever it is, make sure they understand that this isn't just another version of what failed. It's a fresh start designed to deliver results. Sometimes, though, the objection isn't about features or benefits at all. Sometimes it's emotional. People carry baggage from past disappointments, and it can cloud their judgment. In these cases, storytelling becomes even more critical. Share a story about someone who came to you with similar doubts after a bad experience and ended up succeeding. Make the narrative relatable and focus on the transformation. Let them see themselves in that story, moving from frustration to fulfillment. Stories like these don't just inform, they inspire. They remind people that change is possible, even when doubt feels overwhelming. Now let's tackle a slightly tougher objection. I don't have the budget for this. At first glance, this seems like a straightforward financial hurdle. But look closer, and you'll find layers beneath the surface. Often when someone says they can't afford something, what they're really saying is, I'm not sure this is worth the investment. Or perhaps, I don't fully understand the return I'll get. This is where your ability to communicate value becomes crucial. Instead of immediately lowering your price or offering discounts, which can devalue your offering, focus on demonstrating ROI. Break it down in simple terms. Explain how your solution saves them money in the long run, generates revenue, or eliminates inefficiencies. Use real numbers if possible. For example, you might say, I hear you about the budget concerns. Let me show you how this investment pays for itself within specific time frame. By framing it as a smart financial decision rather than an expense, you shift the conversation from cost to value. Another angle to explore is prioritization. Many times, people claim they don't have the budget because they haven't made your offering a priority. If that's the case, help them see why it deserves to be at the top of their list. Ask questions like, what would solving this problem mean for you or your business? Or how much is this issue costing you right now? These questions encourage them to weigh the true cost of inaction against the perceived cost of your solution. Once they see the bigger picture, the budget objection often fades away. Of course, there will be instances where budget truly is a limiting factor. In those cases, flexibility can work in your favor. Offer payment plans, phased implementation, or scaled-down options that still deliver meaningful results. The goal isn't to compromise your standards, but to meet them halfway. Show that you're willing to work with them to find a solution that fits their circumstances. That kind of partnership builds loyalty and trust. One of the less obvious objections, but one that comes up more often than you think, is silence. You present your case, ask for feedback, and nothing. Crickets. No verbal response, no body language cues, just radio silence. It's unnerving, isn't it? But here's the secret: silence isn't always a rejection. Sometimes it's simply a pause, a moment for the other person to process everything you've said. And during that pause, your patience can pay off big time. The worst thing you can do in this situation is fill the silence with more talking. Resist the urge to jump in with additional explanations or persuasive arguments. Doing so can overwhelm the other person and muddy the waters. Instead, wait. Give them space to think. Then, after a few moments, gently nudge the conversation forward with an open-ended question. Something like, does any part of this stand out to you as particularly interesting or challenging? This invites them to share their thoughts without putting them on the spot. Silence can also indicate uncertainty or hesitation. If you sense that's the case, try mirroring their unspoken concerns. For example, you might say, it seems like you're weighing a few things internally. Am I reading that correctly? Mirroring helps build rapport and encourages the other person to open up. Once they voice their concerns, you can address them head-on, turning that silent pause into a productive dialogue. Let's talk about a final type of objection, one that often catches people off guard. I'm happy with what I have. On the surface, this sounds like contentment. But dig a little deeper and you'll find it's usually rooted in comfort or fear of change. People stick with what's familiar because it feels safe, even if it's holding them back. Your challenge is to help them see beyond the status quo, to imagine a better version of their current reality. Start by celebrating their success, acknowledge what's working for them, and affirm their achievements. Say something like, that's fantastic that you're happy with where you are. Clearly you've built something strong. This disarms any defensiveness and positions you as an ally rather than a critic. From there, introduce the idea of incremental improvement. Instead of suggesting a complete overhaul, propose small, manageable changes that enhance what they already have. For example, you might say, imagine how much easier specific tasks could be if you had your solution. It wouldn't replace what's working, it would just make it better. Another effective tactic is to appeal to their aspirations. Most people aren't entirely satisfied with the status quo, even if they claim otherwise. There's always room for growth, innovation, or efficiency. Tap into their vision for the future by asking questions like, where do you see yourself in 5 years, or what's one thing you wish were easier in your day-to-day? These questions spark imagination and plant seeds of possibility. Once they start envisioning a brighter future, the idea of staying put begins to lose its appeal. Throughout all of these strategies, there's one underlying principle that ties everything together: authenticity. People can tell when you're being genuine versus when you're simply trying to close a deal. Authenticity builds trust, and trust is the foundation of every successful relationship, whether personal or professional. So no matter which objection you're facing, approach it with honesty, empathy, and a genuine desire to help. When you do that, you stop seeing objections as barriers and start seeing them as bridges to deeper connections. Consistency matters too. Handling objections effectively isn't a one-time skill, it's a mindset you cultivate over time. Every interaction teaches you something new about human behavior, communication, and persuasion. Pay attention to patterns. Notice which responses resonate most with people and refine your approach accordingly. Over time, you'll develop a natural rhythm that feels less like selling and more like serving. And speaking of serving, remember that objections aren't just opportunities for you, they're opportunities for the other person as well. When you handle objections with care and creativity, you empower them to make informed decisions. You help them see possibilities they might have overlooked. You guide them toward solutions that genuinely improve their lives. That's a gift, and it's one that strengthens your reputation and relationships in the long run. There's also a subtle art to timing in these conversations. Knowing when to push forward and when to step back is crucial. Push too hard and you risk alienating the other person. Step back too soon and you might leave value on the table. The sweet spot lies in reading the room, or in this case, the conversation. Watch for cues, both verbal and nonverbal. Are they leaning in, asking follow-up questions, or showing signs of curiosity? Those are green lights to keep going. Are they pulling back, crossing their arms, or giving short, vague answers? Those are red flags signaling it's time to adjust your approach. Finally, never underestimate the power of preparation. Anticipate objections before they arise. Think through potential concerns and rehearse your responses. This doesn't mean scripting every word. You want to sound natural, not robotic. But having a clear framework in mind gives you confidence. Confidence in turn makes your message more compelling. When you walk into a conversation knowing you're ready for whatever comes your way, it shows. And that assurance can be contagious. Now let's talk about another key element when it comes to turning objections into opportunities. Reframing the conversation. Reframing is like taking a photograph and adjusting the angle so you see something new in the same scene. It's not about changing the facts, it's about shifting perspective. When someone raises an objection, they're looking at the situation through their lens, one that might be clouded by doubt or fear. Your role is to gently guide them toward a clearer, more positive view. For example, imagine someone says, "This feels too complicated. At first glance, this seems like a critique of your offering. But if you dig deeper, what they're really saying is, I'm worried I won't be able to figure this out." That opens the door for you to reframe the complexity as simplicity. You might respond with, I hear you. It can seem overwhelming at first glance. But here's the good news, we break it down step by step so it's easy to follow. Think of it like building blocks. Each piece fits together naturally, and before you know it, you've got the whole picture. By reframing complicated as structured, you transform a potential barrier into a reassuring promise. Reframing works especially well when emotions are involved. People often object because they feel uncertain, scared, or overwhelmed. These emotions aren't logical, they're visceral. So instead of trying to argue against their feelings, acknowledge them and then pivot to a more empowering narrative. For instance, if someone says, I'm afraid this won't work for me, you could reply, it makes perfect sense to feel cautious. You want to make sure this is the right choice. Let's take a closer look at why others in your position found success with this approach. Their journey started just like yours, with a few questions and a lot of hope. This response validates their emotion while steering the conversation toward optimism. Another powerful reframing technique is turning negatives into positive. Let's say someone objects by saying, this feels like a big commitment. Instead of shrinking back, lean into the word commitment and flip its meaning. You might say, you're absolutely right, it is a commitment. But isn't that exactly what you're looking for? A solution that's designed to stick with you and deliver lasting results. Suddenly, what felt like a burden becomes a badge of quality. They start seeing the depth and reliability of your offering rather than just the initial effort required. Now let's zoom in on one of the most overlooked aspects of handling objections: body language. Even though this is a faceless video, understanding the importance of nonverbal communication can still translate powerfully into how you craft your words. In live interactions, body language speaks volumes. It's the tone of your voice, the pauses between sentences, the warmth in your delivery. All these subtle cues shape how your message lands. When you're speaking to someone who's hesitant or unsure, your tone should mirror calm confidence. Avoid sounding rushed or desperate. Those vibes can trigger resistance. Instead, adopt a steady, reassuring rhythm. Picture yourself sitting across from them at a table, leaning in slightly to show you're engaged but not overpowering. Translate that energy into your script by choosing words that feel grounded yet inviting. For instance, instead of saying, you have to see this, try, let me show you something that might really resonate with you. The difference is subtle but impact. Pauses are another tool that can elevate your communication. Silence gives people space to absorb what you've said and process their thoughts. If you barrel ahead without pausing, you risk overwhelming them. On the other hand, strategic breaks create moments of reflection. Imagine saying, think about this, and then letting a beat of silence hang. That pause allows the listener to mentally fill in the blank with their own thoughts, making the message more personal and impactful. Speaking of personalization, one of the best ways to turn objections into opportunities is by tailoring your responses to the individual. Generic answers rarely work because they lack connection. To truly resonate, you need to speak directly to their unique situation. How do you do that? Start by gathering information. Ask questions that uncover their pain points, goals, and priorities. Then weave those insights into your responses. For example, if someone says, I don't think this is right for me, you might reply, tell me more about what you're looking for. Based on what you've shared so far, I think there's a way to align this with your specific needs. This shows you're listening and adapting, which builds trust. Personalization also means using language that feels familiar to them. Pay attention to the words they use when raising objections. Do they describe their concerns in practical terms? How will this save me time? Or emotional ones? Will this make my life easier? Mirror their phrasing in your response. If they focus on efficiency, emphasize productivity. If they prioritize peace of mind, highlight ease and simplicity. Matching their language creates a subconscious bond that makes your message feel more relevant. Let's shift gears now and talk about persistence, not in a pushy way, but in a thoughtful, consistent manner. Some objections require multiple touch points before they dissolve. Someone might say no today, but yes tomorrow, or next week, or next month. The key is staying top of mind without being intrusive. Follow up with value-driven messages that reinforce your credibility and deepen the relationship. Share helpful tips, industry insights, or success stories that align with their interests. Over time, these small gestures build goodwill and keep the door open for future conversations. Persistence also involves knowing when to circle back. If someone raises an objection and you address it thoroughly but they're still unsure, don't force the issue. Instead, plant the seed and give it time to grow. Say something like, "I completely understand where you're coming from. Take some time to think it over. I'll check in again soon to see if anything has changed." This approach respects their process while keeping the lines of communication alive. Sometimes all it takes is a little patience for someone to come around. Of course, persistence doesn't mean repeating the same message over and over. That's a quick way to lose someone's interest. Instead, vary your approach each time you reconnect. Highlight different benefits, share new examples, or introduce fresh perspectives. Keep the conversation dynamic so it feels engaging rather than repetitive. For instance, if your first follow-up focuses on cost savings, your second might emphasize convenience, and your third could spotlight long-term growth. By rotating your angles, you increase the chances of hitting the right note eventually. Now let's dive into the psychology behind objection. Understanding why people object can give you a major edge in addressing their concerns effectively. Often, objections stem from three core drivers: fear, misunderstanding, or indifference. Fear is the biggest culprit. It manifests as worry about failure, loss, or change. Misunderstanding happens when people don't fully grasp the value or mechanics of what you're offering. Indifference occurs when they simply don't see how it applies to their life or goals. Fear-based objections are the trickiest to navigate because they're rooted in emotion rather than logic. Someone might say, "What if this doesn't work?" Or, "What if I regret this decision?" These statements reflect underlying anxieties about risk and uncertainty. To counteract fear, focus on reassurance. Provide guarantees, testimonials, or data that demonstrate reliability. For example, you might say, "I get it. It's natural to wonder about the outcome. That's why we offer specific guarantee. Plus, hundreds of people just like you have seen incredible results." Let me share a quick story. Reassurance calms nerves and shifts the focus from fear to possibility. Misunderstandings, on the other hand, call for clarity. When someone objects because they don't fully understand your offering, your job is to simplify and clarify. Break things down into bite-sized pieces. Use analogies or metaphors to make abstract concepts relatable. For instance, if you're explaining a technical feature, compare it to something everyday, like think of it like GPS for your finances. It guides you step by step so you never get lost. Analogies bridge gaps in comprehension and make your message stickier. As for indifference, overcoming it requires tapping into relevance. People tune out when they don't see how something impacts their world. To combat this, connect your offering to their specific desires or challenges. Ask probing questions like what keeps you up at night? Or if you could wave a magic wand, what would you change about specific area? Once you identify their hot buttons, frame your solution as the answer to their unspoken prayers. Show them how your offering fits seamlessly into their vision for the future. Another psychological principle worth mentioning is social proof. Humans are wired to follow the crowd. We look to others for cues on what to believe or do. When someone raises an objection, leveraging social proof can be incredibly persuasive. Share examples of people who were once in their shoes and went on to achieve success. Highlight statistics, case studies, or endorsements that validate your claims. For instance, you might say, "You're not alone in wondering about this. Many clients had the same question initially, but after seeing specific result, they realized the value firsthand." Social proof reduces skepticism and boosts confidence. Let's loop back to the idea of storytelling for a moment, because it deserves extra emphasis. Stories are the ultimate connectors. They bypass logic and speak directly to the heart. When you tell a compelling story, you invite the listener to step into someone else's shoes and experience the transformation vicariously. Whether it's a tale of overcoming adversity, achieving a goal, or solving a problem, stories create emotional resonance that plain facts simply can't match. To maximize the impact of your stories, structure them strategically. Start with the challenge, the obstacle or struggle that sets the stage. Then introduce the turning point, the moment when everything changed thanks to your solution. Finally, end with the resolution, the happy outcome that leaves the listener inspired. For example, you might say, "There was a client who came to us feeling completely stuck. No matter what they tried, nothing seemed to move the needle. Then they decided to give our system a shot. Within weeks, they saw specific improvement. Today, they're thriving, and it all started with that one decision." Structured storytelling paints a vivid picture that sticks in the listener's mind. Another storytelling tip is to include sensory details. Help the listener visualize the scene by describing sights, sounds, or feelings. For instance, instead of saying they succeeded, say, "You should have seen the smile on their face when they realized how much time they'd saved. It was like a weight had been lifted off their shoulders." Sensory details make the story more immersive and memorable. Now let's talk about consistency in messaging. Consistency breeds familiarity, and familiarity breeds trust. Every time someone hears your name or encounters your brand, they should walk away with the same core impression. This doesn't mean repeating the exact same words verbatim. It means reinforcing the same values, promises, and themes across every interaction. For example, if your central message revolves around simplicity and results, ensure that every objection handling strategy ties back to those pillars. Consistency also extends to your tone and style. If you're warm and friendly in one conversation but abrupt and formal in another, it creates confusion. People crave predictability because it feels so. Whether you're addressing budget concerns, timing issues, or doubts about effectiveness, maintain a steady, approachable demeanor. Be the person they can count on to listen, understand, and guide them forward. Finally, let's touch on the importance of self-belief. Handling objections isn't just about convincing others. It's about believing in yourself and your offering. If you waver even slightly, people will pick up on it. Confidence is contagious, and so is doubt. Before you enter any conversation, take a moment to remind yourself of your strengths, your expertise, and the value you bring to the table. Visualize the outcome you want, a win-win scenario where both parties leave feeling satisfied and empowered. Self-belief also helps you stay resilient in the face of rejection. Not every objection will turn into an opportunity, and that's okay. What matters is how you handle setbacks. Instead of viewing rejections as failures, see them as stepping stones to improvement. Analyze what worked, what didn't, and how you can refine your approach moving forward. Growth comes from learning, not perfection. Remember, objections are not roadblocks. They're opportunities waiting to be unlocked. Every no is a chance to listen deeper, connect better, and offer solutions that truly matter. By reframing doubts, telling compelling stories, and staying authentic, you can transform hesitation into action and resistance into trust. It's all about patience, empathy, and creativity. So embrace objections with confidence, because they're not barriers, they're bridges to progress. Keep learning, keep growing, and most importantly, keep serving others through your passion and purpose.